The janitor's hand hovered over the emergency shutdown button, while smoke poured from the servers behind him. One choice would destroy $100 million. The other choice might destroy his entire life. In the doorway, footsteps echoed. Someone was coming. What should he do? Before we continue, hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The fluorescent lights of Apex Technologies hummed their familiar song at 2:47 a.m., and Louis Austin pushed his yellow cleaning cart down the empty hallway of the 8th floor. His shoulders ached in that deep way that reminded him he was 42, not 22, and his knees made small clicking sounds when he bent to pick up the scattered papers near the water cooler. The papers were always there on Wednesdays. Someone from the marketing department, probably. Louis didn't mind. Each piece of trash, each smudge on the glass doors, each sticky coffee ring on the mahogany tables, they were puzzles he could solve. Simple ones, clean ones. Louis had been cleaning this building for 3 years, ever since the accident took Bianca. The word accident still felt wrong in his mouth, like biting aluminum foil. Bianca hadn't been in an accident. Cancer wasn't an accident. It was a slow theft, taking his wife piece by piece until nothing remained but memories and a 7-year-old daughter who asked questions Louis couldn't answer. He moved through the offices like a ghost, touching nothing that didn't need touching, seeing everything that needed seeing. The executives never looked at him. He was furniture, a shadow. Sometimes he preferred it that way. In the daylight world, people saw his worn sneakers. His graying hair pulled back in a ponytail, his daughter's crayon drawing taped to his cart, a stick figure with a mop that she'd labeled Daddy the Superhero. They saw a janitor. They didn't see the degree in mechanical engineering he'd earned 20 years ago, before medical bills turned dreams into dust. Tonight felt different, though. The air carried a strange electricity, the kind that made his skin prickle. Through the glass walls of the main server room, he could see lights flickering in patterns he'd never noticed before. Red, then amber, then red again, like a heartbeat struggling. Louis checked his watch. His shift ended at 6, which gave him exactly 3 hours and 13 minutes before he needed to pick up Elise from Mrs. Patterson's apartment. Mrs. Patterson charged $20 for overnight babysitting. And she always had breakfast ready, scrambled eggs and toast that Elise said tasted like clouds. Louis couldn't afford to be late. Mrs. Patterson had a church thing on Thursdays. He sprayed cleaning solution on the glass wall of conference room B, watching the liquid catch the light, making rainbows. Elise loved rainbows. She collected them like other kids collected baseball cards, pointing them out in puddles and prisms and soap bubbles. Last week, she'd asked him if Mommy could see rainbows in heaven. The question had hit him like a fist to the stomach, but he'd smiled and said yes. Heaven had the best rainbows. He didn't know if he believed in heaven anymore, but he believed in Elise's need for it. Through the glass, he noticed something odd in the server room. The lights were blinking faster now, and a thin line of smoke curled from one of the massive towers that lined the walls like metal soldiers. Louis stopped mid-wipe. Smoke wasn't good. Smoke was the opposite of good. He'd learned about these systems during his brief, bright period at Henderson Tech, back when he'd been Louis Austin, junior engineer, with a future that stretched out like an open highway. He'd worked on cooling systems, redundancy protocols, the 1,000 small details that kept technology alive. That felt like someone else's life now. Someone younger. Someone whose wife still laughed at breakfast. The smoke thickened. Louis set down his spray bottle with care, muscle memory from Elise's bedtime. Quiet movements, gentle sounds. He approached the server room door and pressed his security card against the reader. Red light. Access denied. Of course. Janitors didn't need access to the heart of the company's operations, but the smoke was darker now, and Louis could hear something else. A high-pitched whine, like a dog whistle made of electricity. Louis pulled out his phone, fingers hovering over the security office number. Then he paused. Bill worked security on Wednesday nights, and Bill was usually 3 beers deep into his shift by this hour, watching basketball replays on his phone. Lewis had seen him, had pretended not to see him, because judging other people's survival methods felt like throwing stones when you lived in a glass house. The whine grew louder. Through the glass, Lewis watched the server's lights shift from their normal steady glow to a frantic strobe. Something was very wrong. Something that would cost money. Maybe a lot of money. The kind of money that made companies fire people, starting with the bottom, starting with janitors who needed every dollar to keep their daughters in school shoes that fit. He pressed his card against the reader again. Red light. Denied. Louis made a decision. He retrieved his cart, pulling out the heavy-duty squeegee with the metal handle. He'd been in construction before engineering school, back when his dad was still alive, and teaching him that every problem had a solution if you knew where to look. His dad had also taught him how to jimmy a lock with the right pressure and the wrong tool. The door clicked open on his third try. Lewis slipped inside, leaving his card in the hallway like evidence he'd eventually have to explain. The server room hit him with a wall of heat that made his eyes water. The temperature had to be over 100 degrees, maybe 120. The cooling system had failed. That's what the smoke was. Overheating circuits, melting insulation, the smell of burning money. Lots of it. Louis moved quickly, scanning the towers. The main coolant line showed a temperature reading of 187 degrees. Critical failure range started at 175. Whatever process was running, it was cooking the entire system from the inside out. His engineering brain kicked in, rusty but functional. If the servers crashed, Apex would lose everything running on them. He'd overheard enough executive conversations while emptying their trash to know the company was processing something massive this week. Something about a government contract. Something with the words 100 million attached to it. He found the main control panel, his fingers remembering buttons and switches he hadn't touched in years. The emergency protocols were still the same. They always were. Engineers built redundancy into everything because engineers knew that everything eventually broke. But shutting down the servers would kill whatever process was running. The data would be lost. The contract would be lost. Jobs would be lost, including his. Not shutting down the servers meant they would melt into expensive slag, taking the data and the contract and the jobs with them anyway. Lewis's hands shook. This wasn't his decision to make. This was so far above his pay grade that it existed in a different atmosphere. He should call someone. The CEO, the CTO, anyone with a title and a salary that included health insurance. But there wasn't time. The smell of burning plastic was getting stronger, and he could see small flames now, licking at the base of Tower 7. In 5 minutes, maybe less, the whole room would be a fire hazard. In 10 minutes, the building's sprinkler system would activate, and water and electronics mixed about as well as Bianca's cancer had mixed with hope. The memory came unbidden. Bianca in her hospital bed, looking at him with those eyes that had gone from brown to hollow, saying, "Don't let fear make your decisions, Lewis. Promise me." He'd promised. He'd held her hand, and promised, even though fear was the only thing he had left to make decisions with. Lewis reached for the emergency shutdown button, then stopped. His hand hovered in the air like a bird that had forgotten how to land. There had to be another way. There always was, his dad had said. Sometimes, you just had to look at the problem from a different angle. He scanned the room again, forcing his panic down into that place where he kept all his other impossible feelings. The cooling system had failed. But why? The backup generators hummed in the corner. Power wasn't the issue. The air conditioning vents gaped open above him. Airflow wasn't the issue. Then he saw it. A single pipe, painted the same industrial beige as everything else, running along the eastern wall. The main water intake for the cooling system. And at its base, almost hidden behind Tower 3, A valve that someone had closed. Completely closed. Cutting off the water supply like a tourniquet on an artery. Who would close a cooling system valve? It made no sense unless someone had done it on purpose. The thought landed in Lewis's chest like ice. Sabotage. Corporate espionage. All those movie words that didn't happen in real life, except apparently they did. And he was standing in the middle of it at 3 a.m, wearing sneakers with holes in them and trying not to think about how much trouble he was already in just for being here. But here was the thing about trouble. When you'd already buried your wife and watched your daughter cry herself to sleep for 6 months straight, when you'd chosen between groceries and electricity and decided on groceries because Elise needed to eat more than she needed lights, trouble became relative. Lewis grabbed the valve and turned it. Hard. Nothing happened. Rust, maybe. Or the valve was stuck. Or the universe was playing one of its little jokes where effort meant nothing and good intentions paved roads to places nobody wanted to go. He tried again, throwing his full weight into it. The valve groaned, protesting. Lewis felt something pop in his shoulder, pain that shot down his arm like lightning, but the valve moved. Inch by stubborn inch, it opened, and Louis heard the beautiful sound of water rushing through pipes. The server temperatures began to drop immediately. 187 became 175, became 162, the numbers falling like mercy. The flames near Tower 7 guttered and died. The smoke thinned. Lewis leaned against the wall, cradling his shoulder, watching the lights on the servers shift back to their normal, steady glow. His heart hammered against his ribs. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He'd done it. He'd fixed it. A problem that would have cost the company everything, solved in seconds by a janitor who wasn't supposed to be there. But the larger problem, the real problem, was just beginning. Because now he had to explain why he was in the server room at all. And why would someone close that valve? The CEO arrived at 3:42 a.m. Lewis heard her heels clicking down the hallway first, sharp sounds that cut through the building's after-hour silence. He'd cleaned himself up as best he could, splashed water on his face in the bathroom, tried to make the pain in his shoulder less obvious in the way he held himself. He'd left the server room door open. Evidence, transparency. All those words that sounded good until you had to live them. Amanda Cerny swept into the 8th floor like a storm given human form. She was younger than Lewis expected. 40, maybe, with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a bun so tight it looked like it hurt. She wore a suit, and her eyes were the kind of blue that made you think of ice caves and deep water. Behind her came 2 men in equally expensive suits, and behind them, the security guard, Bill, looking significantly more sober than he had any right to be at this hour. Amanda stopped when she saw Lewis standing in the hallway. Her gaze moved from his face to his janitor's uniform to the open server room door behind him, and something shifted in her expression. Not anger, exactly. Something colder. Something calculating. "You," she said. Her voice was quiet. Dangerous quiet. "Who are you?" "Lewis Austin, ma'am. Night maintenance." His voice came out steadier than he expected, maybe because he'd had practice delivering bad news. "Your wife has 6 months. The insurance won't cover experimental treatment." "I'm sorry." Bad news had a taste, and Louis had learned to swallow it without choking. "Why are you here?" She gestured at the server room. "This area is restricted. The cooling system failed. I saw smoke. The servers were about to catch fire, so I—" Lewis paused. How did you explain breaking into a secured room without sounding like exactly what he wasn't? "I fixed it." One of the suited men stepped forward, older, with gray hair, and the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile. "You fixed it?" The main water intake valve was closed. I opened it. The temperatures dropped back to normal range. Lewis kept his voice level. "Facts. Just facts. The servers are stable now." Amanda's eyes narrowed. She moved past him into the server room, her heels clicking against the tile. The two men followed. Lewis stayed in the doorway, his shoulder throbbing in time with his heartbeat. He watched her scan the temperatures on the control panel, her fingers moving over the keyboards with the familiarity of someone who actually understood what she was looking at. The older man pulled out a tablet, muttering numbers under his breath. The younger man, thin, nervous, with sweat staining his collar despite the building's air conditioning, kept looking at Lewis like he was trying to solve a complicated equation. Amanda turned around slowly. The expression on her face had shifted again, from ice to something Lewis couldn't quite read. "You're right. Someone closed the main intake valve." She looked at the nervous young man. "Thomas, this is your department. Explain." Thomas went whiter than his already pale complexion allowed. Miss Kearney, The evening maintenance should have checked. Evening maintenance checks cooling systems once per shift," the older man interrupted. His voice carried authority. "This valve was closed after 10 p.m. I can check the security logs, but..." He stopped, looking at Lewis. "How did you know to open the valve?" Lewis met his gaze. Here was the moment. The explanation that would either save or sink him. "I studied mechanical engineering at City College. Worked at Henderson Tech for 2 years before..." He stopped. "Before Bianca got sick. Before everything fell apart. Before I needed more flexible hours." "City College," Amanda repeated. She took a step closer to him. "Henderson Tech, and now you're cleaning floors at Apex." It wasn't a question, so Lewis didn't answer it. He'd learned that silence was often safer than words. "Do you know what was running on those servers tonight?" Amanda asked. "No, ma'am. A simulation. For a defense contract worth $117 million. If those servers had crashed, if we'd lost the data..." She paused, and Lewis saw something flash across her face. Not anger. Relief. "We would have lost everything. The contract, our investors, possibly the company." The hallway felt very small suddenly, very quiet. "You saved us," Amanda said softly. Then louder, to the two men. "He saved the entire company." Thomas made a small sound, like a balloon losing air. The older man was staring at Lewis with a new expression. Respect, maybe. Or suspicion. With men in suits, it was hard to tell the difference. "Bill," Amanda said, not looking away from Lewis. "Pull the security footage from the server room. I want to see who accessed this area today, all of it." Bill nodded and disappeared down the hallway, walking fast, like he was grateful to be dismissed. Amanda took another step closer. She was small, maybe 5'4", but she carried herself like someone much taller. "What's your daughter's name?" The question hit Lewis like a slap. "What? Your daughter? The one who drew the picture on your cart?" Amanda gestured toward the hallway, where his yellow cart sat abandoned, Elise's crayon drawing visible even from here. "What's her name?" "Elise," Louis said carefully. His protective instinct sparked. "She's 7. 7? Amanda nodded slowly. "And you work nights, so you can be with her during the day?" This felt like a test. Everything felt like a test. "Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Patterson watches her while you're here. $20 a night plus breakfast." Lewis's blood ran cold. How did she know that? How did she know any of that? Amanda must have seen the panic in his face, because her expression softened slightly. "I make it my business to know my employees, Mr. Austin. All of them, even the ones other people don't see." She turned to the older man. "Richard, I want you to review the simulation data. Make sure we lost nothing. Thomas, you're on administrative leave until we figure out what happened here. And Mr. Austin," she looked back at Lewis, "you're coming with me." Amanda's office occupied the entire 20th floor, glass walls overlooking the city lights that stretched to the horizon like fallen stars. Louis had cleaned this office 100 times, always at night, always alone. He'd never seen it with Amanda in it. She filled the space differently than emptiness did. She gestured to a chair across from her desk. Lewis sat, his shoulders screaming. He was pretty sure he'd torn something when he forced the valve open. The pain had a color now, bright red, pulsing. Amanda settled into her own chair and studied him for a long moment. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten, that strange pre-dawn gray that meant morning was coming, whether you were ready or not. "I'm going to tell you something, Mr. Austin," Amanda said finally, "and I'm trusting that you'll understand why it matters." She paused. "Thomas Waverly, the young man you just saw, he's been selling company secrets to our competitors for 6 months." Lewis felt the words land, but couldn't quite process them. "What?" "We've been investigating him. We have evidence, transaction records, encrypted communications. He needed one more mistake, one concrete incident we could tie directly to sabotage." Amanda leaned forward. "Closing that cooling valve was that mistake. He did it thinking the servers would crash, the simulation would be lost, and our competitor would have time to submit their own bid for the defense contract." "But Louis stopped. He'd foiled the sabotage by accident, by being in the wrong place at the right time. "You fixed it before the real damage could be done," Amanda finished, "which means we have our evidence against Thomas, and we still have our contract." She smiled, and it transformed her face into something almost warm. "You gave us everything we needed, Mr. Austin." Lewis's mind spun. This wasn't how these stories went. The janitor didn't accidentally catch the corporate spy. The janitor didn't sit in the CEO's office at dawn, watching the sunrise paint the glass walls gold. "There's something else," Amanda said. Her voice had changed, gone softer. "I know who you are, Lewis Austin. I know what you were." The room tilted slightly. "I don't. Henderson Tech, 20 years ago. You designed a cooling system that's still considered one of the most efficient in the industry. Your mentor was Dr. James Henderson." Amanda pulled out a folder from her desk drawer, opened it. Inside were papers Lewis recognized, his old resume, his thesis, photos of systems he'd built. "Dr. Henderson was my father." The world stopped making sense. Lewis stared at her, searching for resemblance. The eyes, maybe. The way she held her head. "He died 5 years ago," Amanda continued. "But before he did, he talked about you. About the young engineer with the brilliant mind who disappeared. He tried to find you, did you know that? Wanted to bring you back. But you'd vanished into the caregiving system, and then," she paused, "I'm sorry about your wife." Louis couldn't speak. His throat had closed around words that wouldn't come. "When you applied for the janitorial position here 3 years ago, I recognized your name immediately. I wondered if you'd mention the connection, but you didn't. You just wanted a job with night hours and health insurance for your daughter." Amanda closed the folder. "I approved your application personally, and I've been watching ever since, wondering if that brilliant mind was still there, under all the grief." "You've been testing me," Lewis managed. Anger sparked, hot and sudden. "You let me clean toilets when you knew I could. I gave you a job when you needed one," Amanda interrupted, her voice sharp. "With benefits, with stability, with no pressure, no expectations. What would you have done if I'd offered you an engineering position 3 years ago, Mr. Austin? When you were still raw from loss, when your daughter needed you present, not drowning in the deep end of technical work?" The anger flickered and died. She was right. 3 years ago, Lewis had been barely functional. He'd needed simple work, repetitive work, work that let his grief breathe. "But tonight," Amanda said, "tonight you proved something. You saw a problem and you fixed it. Not because it was your job, but because it was the right thing to do, even though it could have cost you everything." She stood up, walked to the window. The sun was rising now, painting the sky in colors Elise would have loved. "My father used to say that true engineers can't help themselves. They see broken things, and they fix them. It's instinct. like breathing. Louis watched her silhouette against the light. His shoulder throbbed. His mind raced. "I'm offering you a choice, Mr. Austin," Amanda said, turning around. "You can go back to night maintenance. Same hours, same pay, same life. No one needs to know what happened here except us. Or," she paused, "or you can come work for me. Senior systems engineer. Day shift, 9 to 5. Health insurance, retirement plan. Salary that means Mrs. Patterson can watch Elise after school instead of overnight. Means Elise can have birthday parties and new shoes when she needs them. Not when you can afford them. There's no pressure," Amanda added. "No shame in saying no. You've built a life that works for you and your daughter. That matters more than any job title." Louis thought about Elise, about the way she'd looked at him last week when he'd told her they couldn't afford the field trip to the science museum, about the crayon drawing on his cart, the stick figure superhero with a mop, about Bianca's voice in his memory, saying, "Don't let fear make your decisions." "I'll need to talk to Elise," Louis heard himself say. "She's part of this choice, too." Amanda smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "Of course. Take the week. But Mr. Austin?" She extended her hand. "Thank you. For saving my company. For being in the right place at the right time with the right knowledge." She paused. "My father would have been proud." Louis shook her hand, feeling the firmness of her grip, the calluses on her palm that suggested she'd worked her way up just like everyone else. "What happens to Thomas?" "Thomas will be arrested this afternoon. The evidence is conclusive." Amanda's expression hardened. "He made his choices. Now he lives with them." Outside the window, the city came awake. Cars on the streets below, lights in windows, people beginning their days with coffee and conversation, and all the small rituals that made life feel normal. Louis thought about his own rituals, checking Elise's homework, making breakfast, the walk to school where they counted rainbows. "One more thing," Amanda said as Louis stood to leave. "The bonus, for preventing the system failure. The board approved $50,000. Louis sat back down. $50,000. It's standard for preventing critical system failures, resulting in significant financial loss. Consider it hazard pay." She smiled. "And maybe a down payment on a house where Elise can have her own room, with windows that catch the morning light, for rainbows." The mention of rainbows broke something in Louis's chest. The tears came before he could stop them, silent and relieving, like rain after drought. He didn't hide them, didn't apologize for them. Amanda quietly pushed a box of tissues across her desk and turned back to the window, giving him privacy in the only way that mattered, by pretending not to see. When Louis could breathe again, when the tears had dried and his voice was steady, he said, "Thank you." "Thank you, Mr. Austin," Amanda replied, "for reminding me why my father loved this work. Why he loved finding talent in unexpected places." She turned back to face him. "Go home, hug your daughter, think about what you want your life to look like. Then call me." Louis left the office as the sun cleared the horizon, his shadow stretching long behind him. Louis picked up Elise from Mrs. Patterson's apartment at 7:15 a.m., early enough that the old woman gave him a curious look, but didn't ask questions. Elise was still sleepy, her hair sticking up in ways that made her look like a dandelion gone to seed. "Daddy?" she mumbled as he buckled her into their 10-year-old Honda. "You're early." "Special day," Louis said. His shoulder hurt, but he'd stopped at a pharmacy and bought a brace. Tomorrow he'd see a doctor. Tomorrow he'd figure out the insurance paperwork. Tonight, today, he just wanted to be with his daughter. They drove to the beach, the one an hour outside the city where the sunrise looked like something out of Elise's picture books. They sat on the hood of the car, wrapped in the emergency blanket Louis kept in the trunk, and watched the light paint the water, gold and pink and orange. "Daddy," Elise said, leaning against him, "did you save the world tonight?" Louis thought about towers of servers and closed valves, about CEOs who remembered names and dead mentors who'd seen potential in young engineers. He thought about choices and chances and the strange ways life circled back to itself. Maybe a small part of it, he said. Elise considered this. Good. The world needs saving. Then, after a moment, Mommy would be proud. The words hit him softer than he expected. Gentler. Yeah, Louis said, his voice rough. Yeah, she would be. They stayed until the sun was fully up, until Elise started asking about breakfast and rainbows and whether they could stop at the library on the way home. Louis said yes to all of it. Yes to breakfast at the diner where pancakes came with real maple syrup. Yes to the library where Elise could pick out books about birds and space and anything else that caught her 7-year-old imagination. Yes to a life that might include birthday parties and field trips and shoes that fit. He'd call Amanda on Monday. He'd take the job. Not because of the money, though the money mattered. Lord knew it mattered. But because his daughter deserved a father who could breathe again, who could look forward instead of back, who could be Louis Austin, engineer, and still be Daddy the superhero. That afternoon, while Elise napped on the couch surrounded by library books, Louis took out his phone and looked at his contacts. He scrolled to a number he hadn't called in 3 years. His old professor, Dr. Helen, who'd taught him that engineering wasn't just about fixing things. It was about understanding why they broke in the first place. He composed a text, deleted it, wrote another. Finally settled on something simple. I'm ready to come back, if there's still room. The response came faster than expected. There's always room for good people. Coffee tomorrow? Louis smiled, set down his phone, and watched his daughter sleep. Elise's hands were curled under her chin, her breathing soft and even. On the coffee table, her newest drawing showed a stick figure at a computer, surrounded by what might have been servers, or towers, or dragons. Hard to tell with 7-year-old art. The figure wore a cape. Underneath, in Elise's careful printing, Daddy the real superhero. Outside, the afternoon sun caught the crystal hanging in their window, throwing rainbows across the walls. Elise would count them when she woke up. She'd exclaim over each one like it was magic, because at 7, everything could still be magic if you looked at it right. Louis thought about Bianca, about the way she'd made him promise not to let fear drive his choices. He thought about Amanda Cerny, who'd given him a second chance without making it feel like charity. He thought about Dr. Henderson, a man he'd known for only 2 years, but who'd apparently never forgotten him. Some things broke beyond repair. Marriages ended in hospital rooms with beeping machines and too bright lights. Engineers became janitors because life demanded it. Young men betrayed their companies for money and got caught because someone closed a valve at exactly the wrong moment. But some things could be fixed. Systems could be cooled. Valves could be opened. Engineers could remember why they'd fallen in love with problem-solving in the first place. Single fathers could learn that accepting help wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. Louis leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. His shoulder ached. His back ached. His heart ached in that good way. The way that meant it was still working, still beating, still capable of breaking and healing, and breaking again. Tomorrow, he'd meet Dr. Helen for coffee. Next week, he'd start his new position at Apex Technologies. Next month, he'd sign a lease on a house with windows that caught the morning light. Tonight, he'd make Elise her favorite dinner, spaghetti with butter and too much Parmesan. And they'd watch the sunset from their apartment balcony, counting clouds and airplanes and any rainbows the universe decided to throw their way. The janitor who'd fixed a $100 million problem in seconds was gone. In his place stood Louis Austin, engineer, father, survivor. Someone who'd learned that the hardest problems didn't have simple solutions, but they could be solved anyway, one small choice at a time. Elise stirred on the couch, her eyes fluttering open. "Daddy?" she mumbled. "I dreamed about Mommy. She was painting rainbows." Louis moved to sit beside her, pulling her into a gentle hug. "Yeah?" "Yeah. She said to tell you." Elise yawned, still half asleep. "She said you're doing good. Real good." Louis held his daughter close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and library books and childhood. The rainbow from the window, crystal danced across their faces, and somewhere in the building, someone else's life was falling apart, or coming together, or simply continuing, the way lives did. But here, in this moment, with his daughter in his arms and a future that finally looked like hope, Louis Austin allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, some broken things could be made whole again. Not perfect, not the way they were before, but whole in a different way. A better way. The way that came from surviving the impossible and finding out you were stronger for it.